Pardon me?
Glad you could finally come in.
I just had an opportunity to sit down with Ketanji Brown-Jackson, the nominee of President Biden to be on the Supreme Court and fill the Stephen Breyer vacancy. It's not the first time we met. In fact, it's not the first time she was in my office. She was there, we think, we're trying to guess, in 2011 as a member of the Sentencing Commission. I had passed a reform of sentencing on crack cocaine, and she was a member of the Sentencing Commission, which ultimately unanimously decided to make that decision retroactive. It included support of conservative Republicans and others on a bipartisan basis. Let me tell you why I believe that this woman is ready to make history in America. She has an extraordinary background. If you're going to be the first in America, you better bring credentials to the task, and she does. She has been an outstanding law student, an outstanding clerk for 3 different levels of the judiciary, including for the retiring Justice Stephen Breyer. She has been before this Judiciary Committee. This will be her 4th time. She's been before it 3 different times, successfully with bipartisan support approved by the Judiciary Committee. The most recent was just this last year when she was approved for the D.C. Circuit Court. Every single time she's come before the committee, she's had bipartisan support. That is quite a source of pride in this day and age with the contentious partisanship that we have. She's an amazing person personally. We talked about her background and things that she had been through. And I would say that she's in a position now where she's prepared to come before the committee and before the Senate and to win the nomination officially before the Senate. I want to say a word about the timing of this. She is going to be have a hearing before the committee on March the 21st. I informed Senator Grassley of that this morning, and he is taking it to his caucus to announce that that is the date that we chose. He didn't choose that date. It was chosen by the Democratic majority. Let me tell you why I believe it is fair. That will be the 24th day after President Biden's announcement of this nominee. The hearing begins on March 21st. It has been less than a year since she was before the committee and considered for her current judgeship. In comparison, Amy Coney Barrett came before the committee 16 days after President Trump's announcement. In this case, it's 24 days. And secondly, Judge Barrett had been on the bench 3 years, so it had been 3 years between the consideration of the Judiciary Committee for her circuit position and the Supreme Court approval. In this case, Judge Jackson will have been less than a year when she comes in for a hearing. I'm looking forward to this. It's an awesome responsibility and possibly the greatest responsibility of the Senate Judiciary Committee to advise and consent to a president's nominee for a lifetime appointment to the highest court on the land. I want this to be fair, timely, and professional. I am going to beseech my colleagues on both sides to keep this at a high level of discourse because we are considering issues of great constitutional moment and issues that are very important for the future of this country. So let me open this to any questions you have.
Considering the historic nature of the nomination, anybody having any conversations about opening this to the public? People can come in person and see this historic moment in person?
You reminded me of a question I didn't address, and let me address it first. No, yours is a good question. I think mine is too. And it's the fact that we're going to make sure that Judge Jackson is available to all of the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee before March 21st. And then after March 21st, any other senator who wants to meet with her will have that opportunity. Senator Grassley raised that issue, and I think it's a fair issue. For the Republicans I've reached out to, I've said over and over again, we want to make her available if you want to. In terms of the public attending it, we are evolving here when it comes to the safety of COVID-19, dealing with COVID-19. I think last night was a major step forward at the State of the Union address that neither the President nor not many, members of the House and Senate were wearing masks. That, I think, is a positive sign, and let's hope that it proves to be in the days ahead as we measure the impact of that public gathering. But as long as we have an opportunity for an orderly witnessing of this process, I would support it. But I want to make sure, first and foremost, that we take into consideration public health and security, and I'll rely on the experts to give advice on that.
Obviously gone are the days when there are wide confirmation votes for members of the Supreme Court. I'm guessing that that's from a bygone era. But in this historic nomination, what are your expectations or hopes for building bipartisan support? And what do you think today's measure of that would be?
Good question. Timely question. I just finished reread a book called Becoming Justice Blackmun by Linda Greenhouse, and talked about 1970 and how different things were at that time, the limited amount of time that was spent in the committee, the overwhelming vote, and we've seen many votes since that were overwhelmingly bipartisan. But it's been a while since that's happened. So I'm looking for a bipartisan vote, and I'm not going to define that for you. We know it's at least one Republican voting for. I hope there are more, and I'm reaching out to some names you would be surprised. I'm not saying I'm winning them over, but I'm telling them that I hope they'll consider it, and most of them are surprised, maybe even a little flattered that I'd give them a call. I think it'd be good for the Senate and good for the Supreme Court if that happens. I don't know how to measure it in terms of my effectiveness. Being a whip, I don't presume a vote.
If I could follow up just one last time. On Monday during the pen and pad, you said you look forward to talking to your friend Senator Lindsey about this. Have you yet spoken to him?
Not yet.
He said a couple days ago that he wasn't even sure if he would meet with her.
I know. I'm still going to talk to him.
You laid out the timeline, obviously, comparing it to Justice Barrett. Is that, in your view, sort of the new standard for how you see Supreme Court nominees sort of working?
Well, it's a contemporary standard, and it's an analogous standard. A recent appointment to the Circuit Court moving to the Supreme Court. And that's why I think we make reference to it. Many of the same players who were here for Justice Barrett's nomination are still on the committee. And so it's tough for them to argue that we're doing anything particularly different.
Mr. Chair, can you just elaborate a little bit more? You said you talked about her background. Was this more of her judicial background, personal combination? And also, can you just walk us through the next steps between now and the 21st, how you and the committee will be getting ready for the hearing?
Well, let me talk about the steps first. And that is, we sent the questionnaire to the White House last Friday, and it got the response back by Monday evening. It's a thick response, and it refers to some 537 cases that she decided. 578. I knew there was a 5 and a 7 in it. 578 cases that she had written an opinion on in the D.C. Circuit, District Court. And I think there were 8 cases in the circuit that she was in.
I'll get you the exact
We'll give you exact numbers. Anyhow, the point I want to make is for those who want to know who she is and how she thinks, we have lots of evidence to present to them. So I would assume that the staff, both sides, Democrats and Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee, will start there, as they should. There will be some documents provided traditionally to supplement anything that's needed in terms of her background, how that is concerned. You had one other question?
Just more specifically, if you could elaborate on your discussions about her background, what did you discuss?
Well, we talked about a number of things, and some of them I'm just going to keep to myself at the moment. But we talked about her family, talked about her daughter. I think it's a pretty well-known story about how her daughter, when she learned of Justice Scalia's passing, her daughter sent a letter to President Obama and said, I got the perfect person for the vacancy, my mom. And that I think is a wonderful, heartwarming story of her relationship with it. Yes.
On the truncated timeline, I know you're likening it to the Amy Coney Barrett timeline, but part of the reason why people like Manchin and Collins ended up voting against that was because of how short of a time it was. Have they voiced that here, or are they okay with it?
No, I haven't brought it up with him. And I think giving more time is appropriate, but also distinguishing the fact that it's been less than a year since she appeared before a committee is also an important factor.
Senator, on the timeline, would you anticipate a committee vote the week following the committee hearings, or is that
Under the rules of the committee, I believe that can be held over if it's the decision of the minority for an additional week. Is that right? So we're starting with that presumption. If we have good fortune and it comes the other way, it'll be sooner. Yes.
Senator, you think that Judge Jackson should answer questions about our judicial philosophy and methodology?
It'll always be a question. It's a question for every nominee. Today we had 5 nominees for district and circuit court, and at least half of them were asked that question. I don't assign the same importance to that as a lot of my colleagues do. They think that is the big tell if they can get somebody to say, well, I'm an originalist or I'm a textualist or whatever the heck that means anymore. But I don't think that's going to be decisive for anybody who really follows this closely.
Senator, along the lines of trying to muster Republican support, she does have outside Republican support.
Wow, does she?
Have you decided, will some of that feature in the intro? Have you asked Paul Ryan to introduce her as he has in the past?
Of course, Paul, whom I know personally and like, spoke for her. They are related by marriage. He spoke for her in one of her earlier pursuits and had some very glowing things to say. So any support from him I would welcome. But it really is a decision by the White House and the nominee as to the witnesses that will be presented in that circumstance. We may have some input, but they have the last word. Yes?
Just to follow up on, you said you're talking to Republicans. Can you give us an idea of how many you think are possible?
Talking about a handful.
Half a dozen, a dozen? Can you characterize it?
I think we're closer to the half dozen range, but if I see a glimmer of hope, I'll pull out my Senate rules and start thumping them.
And related to that, if there are about a half dozen Republicans, what case do you make to the Republicans who may have voted against her for the D.C. Circuit, but may actually be genuinely considering her for this higher court?
Well, I don't know their reasoning as to why they opposed her on the D.C. Circuit. There are a lot of circumstances, and I try to go at it with an open mind. And my first appeal to them is, this is a moment in the history of the United States. And I always want to try to be on the right side of history. And I hope that they'll consider it and give her a second look if the first time around they didn't support her. I've been pleasantly surprised and really surprised in some respects of the reaction of the African American community to this nomination. It is powerful, powerful. And I don't want to try to overanalyze it, but when you think about 115 justices and not one black woman in the history of the court, it is going to make a difference.
And also, I know Judge Jackson has an extensive background at the district level, but some Republicans have pointed to her limited time on the circuit court as a point of criticism, and do you think that's a fair point?
I don't think it is. I think she was well qualified and prepared for it with over 500 written opinions. There's little mystery as to how she views a case and analyzes it. And I think that she's demonstrated that again. I think Senator McConnell, for example, raised that, the limited number of opinions. I'll say I don't think that holds her back at all. Yes?
Breyer is not retiring until this summer. Could you spell out why you guys want this sort of shorter, or this sort of, sped up timeline? Is it because of the thin majority in the Senate? I mean,
Well, of course, that's part of it, and there's no reason to wait and delay as far as I'm concerned. She's, as I said, got a clear record and going to make it available for all of the senators to view and be personally available There's no reason to wait on this, and we are not going to hurry Justice Breyer out the door. I agree with President Biden last night in his tribute to the man, but there's precedent. There's ample precedent for Senate approval and then delay in the actual swearing in until the vacancy occurs. Anything else? Yes.
I just want to clarify, so she won't talk to anyone who's not on the committee?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
The priority is committee, to make sure that every committee member before the hearing had their chance. And as I said earlier, Senator Grassley made that point to his own colleagues. Don't lurk. Don't wait. If you want to do this, tell us right now, so we'll get.
There would be a possibility that the people off the committee would meet with her.
Yes, and it's just a matter of availability of time.
Quick off-topic one, asked about the omnibus and how concerned you were that it might not pass next week, and we might have another CR and Ukraine aid is going to be attached and be held up. Any concern about that?
I'm very concerned about this. This is long overdue. I'm an appropriator, and I know what little activity there was in the formal committee during the course of the fiscal year leading up to October 1st of last year. It's time for us to roll up our sleeves and get this done. I cannot imagine in this moment of history with the Ukrainians facing what they're facing and our allies so anxious to make sure that we're on board, that we are delaying this any longer. We've got to move on this, and the sooner the better.
Just a question on the hearings. When the Barrett hearings took place, Graham called for the vote the same day the hearings ended to avoid having to wait for a week, knowing that there would be a holdover. Are you going to do that? Are you going to compact it by a week by perhaps calling?
I don't want to presume the schedule beyond March 21st. We'll start there and stay tuned. Okay, thanks everybody.